Andy, I'll come to you in a second, but I want to ask Ben first. Do you believe devolution works, Ben?
No, it doesn't work. I don't think it works at any level, frankly. You look at what devolution has produced. You've got a First Minister in Northern Ireland who won't denounce the IRA and wants Northern Ireland to be taken back into the Republic. You've got a First Minister in Scotland who wants to break up the United Kingdom. And the argument that was made for devolution by Tony Blair when he settled it was that it would bring the union closer. But you cannot possibly bring the union and the country closer by separating it, which effectively is what devolution is. And so I think fundamentally at a constitutional level, it's very damaging. And then you've got all the moral hazard, if you like, of having the right to make decisions, but if you get them wrong, actually you'll be bailed out by Westminster, and we've seen that happen repeatedly.
And if it goes wrong, you can just blame Westminster.
And if it goes wrong, you blame Westminster. And then we had the idiocy of, for example, during the pandemic, with different parts of the United Kingdom having different policies on essentially the same pandemic, on the same pandemic. Yeah. No, I just don't think it works. And I'd abolish the mayoralties as well. And as one of your comments came in earlier, I mean, I completely agree. It just piles cost on cost.
But do politicians in Westminster, can they really understand all the issues right across the country? Surely the sort of Westminster view will be very different to how it is in many of the constituencies out there.
I mean, we have every constituency is represented in Westminster. We should have one parliament. We're one country. We are the United Kingdom. How can you be united if you're literally, breaking up the powers across the UK? No, there should be one Parliament. We should get the constituencies right to ensure that people genuinely do have proper representation in Westminster, and decisions should be made in Westminster.
Andy Williams, what do you make of this? Devolution is about a quarter of a century old, and there are many people, certainly our viewers and listeners, who question its validity and whether it's actually working or not. But there are lots of people as well who say, actually, local power is in the hands of local people, is actually working well and brings a renewed focus to those issues in those different parts of the UK. What do you think, Andy?
Well, I think devolution to Scotland, to Wales and to Northern Ireland was absolutely necessary. And I think broadly it has worked well, actually. I think there have been significant successes in terms of, power around things like healthcare and education being devolved to those nations. I think it's really important in many ways. It's played an important part in keeping the nation together. There was a referendum in Scotland, and Scotland obviously voted to remain part of the United Kingdom. I think Ben's making a slightly different argument there, which is that he doesn't like the leaders who've been elected to run those nations.
I mean, the point that Ben, I don't want to talk for Ben, but I think the point that Ben makes is an interesting one in terms of the fact that certainly this is at least the discussion about the breakup of the United Kingdom has been increased anyway. Look, the SNP, that's their raison d'etre. They want independence, and that's fair enough. And
I think that would have happened anyway. In fact, part of the rationale for devolving power to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland was to try and quell the arguments in favour.
But it didn't work.
No, it fueled it. It fueled it.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, there was a huge groundswell of, and actually there has been a massive amount. If you look across the world, there have been nation states looking to break away, break up. The one thing I would say, and where I do agree with Ben, is I would be sceptical about devolving too much power to the local level. I think the metro mayors, if you look at Manchester, Liverpool, the North East, Birmingham is another example. I think they've broadly worked well, but I wouldn't like to see that replicated or sort of pushed too far down. I do think there's an important role for national politics.
In Northern Ireland, Ben, just final question on this, and then I want to look at some of the stories of the day. In Northern Ireland, you've teamed up, haven't you, with a party, the Traditional Unionist Voice, small party in Northern Ireland, one MLA, who are essentially against devolution and think that the mandatory coalition in Northern Ireland that hasn't been working for about half the time since the Belfast Agreement in 1998 just isn't working. You've decided to make that link up with the Traditional Unionist Voice.
Yeah, so I mean, Northern Ireland is perhaps the best example of how bad devolution can be, because we started, as you say, with the Belfast Agreement in 1998, which...
I mean, that arguably brought peace to Northern Ireland. I mean, sure, and devolution was part of that.
And the argument made for the Belfast Agreement was that it was a peace settlement, but actually the nationalists, the Republican nationalists in Northern Ireland, saw it as a bridgehead towards reunification.
But that's their right to do so, Ben.
And then Stormont became their soapbox to make those arguments repeatedly. And the reason we've teamed up with the traditional Unionist voice is because the Democratic Unionist Party, who arguably were the guardians of political unionism in Northern Ireland, effectively did a deal with the government embedding the Irish Sea border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which is an abomination from the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson signed with the EU in 2020. They embedded that border and they basically lied. The DUP lied. They said the border doesn't exist. That's what Jeffrey Donaldson said before he had to step down as leader last week. And sadly, the DUP had a terrific opportunity when Jeffrey Donaldson left to say that they were going to review the decisions that he'd made.
Well, we'll see if they
haven't done it. They haven't done it.
We'll see if they do that.